So as this program, especially as this program sort of is looking at artist residencies, which sort of provide space for artists to work, I do want to acknowledge that the land on which the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art at SUNY New Paltz sits is the ancestral homeland of the Munsee, Lenape, and Esopus peoples who are indigenous to this region. And we do pay honor and respect their ancestors past and present. So I'm so happy to have you here today. I'm going to kick it over to the Dorsky Museum's director and the curator of the exhibition Life After the Revolution, Kate Millette's Art Colony for Women, Anna Conlon.
Thank you, Zach. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've been so looking forward to this conversation and learning and hearing from our wonderful guests today. We have with us Erin Zona, Artistic Director at Women's Studio Workshop, Hannah Fraser, Executive Director at the Center for Photography at Woodstock, Rachel Carrigan, Residency Program Manager at Denniston Hill, and Helen Toomer, Co-founder and Director of Stoneleaf Retreat. And the reason we've gathered these amazing people today is to talk about artist residencies and creating spaces to support artists and support their art making. And as Zach said, the exhibition that's currently on at the Dorsky Museum, Life After the Revolution, was a wonderful excuse to gather people together and have this discussion today. So I don't want to take up too much time because I want to hear from our amazing guests, but I will give a little background on this exhibition and provide a bit of context of an example of the history of an artist residency in the Hudson Valley, of which there are many, and they continue to grow. As we all know, for those who live in the Hudson Valley, it's such a creative place with a rich history of artists and culture makers coming to the Hudson Valley, going back hundreds of years. So the residency that I was, or the colony, artist colony that I was interested in and researching for my exhibition was one that was set up by the writer and activist and academic and artist Kate Millett, who, as many of you know, was a major figure in the American women's movement. In 1970, Kate published her PhD dissertation called Sexual Politics, and it went on to become a foundational text of the American women's movement. And it was with the advance from that book that she purchased an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Poughkeepsie that she would call Millett Farm as a kind of private artist retreat for herself and for her husband at the time. But increasingly, as the 70s went on, Kate really wanted to share the space with other women, and she wanted to really devote the space to women's creativity and art making. Sophie, Kate's wife, really helpfully was thinking, I was asking her what inspired Kate to do this? Why did she want to share the land with others in this way? And the more she thought about it, Sophie thinks there was a connection with Kate going to LA in 1978 and spending time at the Women's Building in LA. So the Women's Building was this space that was started by Judy Chicago and Arlene Raven and Sheila de Bretteville. And similarly to Kate Millette's art colony, they believed that art making and creativity should be part of the feminist movement. It should be integrated into their political movement at the time and be part of what they were all working together towards. And that was something that Kate Millett believed as well. So Kate had visited the Women's Building. She had an exhibition of sculpture there, and she experienced what it was like having a group of creative people, having a group of artists working together to produce this exhibition and to produce a space where women could gather and make art. And of course, in the 70s and 80s and still today, women, and especially queer women, were facing, prevalent sexism and homophobia in the mainstream and didn't have access to dominant modes of representation or distribution of their work in gallery systems or mainstream media or museums. So having to create your own spaces to make work and to share your work was something that people were figuring out at the time in different ways. So by 1979, they had decided they were going to share the Millett farm with other women artists. They bought neighboring parcel of land so that in total they had about 80 acres so that they could be self-sustainable. They didn't want to depend on foundation or grant money. They didn't want to depend on government or private donors. So they decided to grow a crop. And the crop they chose was Christmas trees, with the idea that it was going to be low maintenance, which of course it wasn't. It was a lot of hard work, and renovating the buildings, the different barns, and raising new barns was also incredibly hard work and required hundreds of women coming and volunteering their time for many, many years. To be able to create living spaces and create studio spaces, a sculpture workshop, a dark room, a print workshop, and space for women to live and create work together. The initial really hard work building stage came to a kind of an end in the mid-1980s when an official artist residency program began, where they put adverts in the feminist press and women artists would apply for summer residencies where they could come for 3 months and live at Millett Farm. They had to chip in for their food expenses, and they were still expected to work for 5 hours a day on the farm, on the buildings or the fields. So I'm not sure if anyone applying for your guys' residencies would be into working 5 hours a day, but there were certain people who were okay with that and came to the farm, and that's what they did. And the remainder of their time they could work on their practice, whether it was visual arts or writing, but also just spend time together, spend time in nature, and have the space of a summer at the farm. For Kate, there was a pedagogical aspect to all of this, and it was about, you know, valuing women's creativity and giving them the space they needed to make the art, but also building their confidence and building skills, and kind of setting women up with kind of sustenance to then go back into the real world. And for many of the women that I spoke to who went through the farm residency program, you know, it was a transformative experience. It was challenging in many, many ways, often learning skills that weren't traditionally taught to women, but also having the opportunity to really nurture their own creativity and build community with other women. And especially for queer women, having the freedom to spend time with each other in that space was super meaningful and transformative for many people who went through that. So I think I'll probably end there, but I'm interested in thinking about, I will say that, so the residency program continued, the Christmas trees grew, it ended up being successful, and it was able to sustain the farm for many years. Kate ended up winding operations down and selling the big parcels of land when she was in her 70s, and the labor of it all got too much. But artists would come and stay on the farm in unofficial capacities and work with Kate through to like 2015. So there were, for several decades, Millett Farm was this space that was really dedicated to women artists, and it was this kind of gender separate community. Yeah, and for me, it's been such an honor and privilege to kind of learn about this history and talk with many of the women that were part of that program. And it leads me to be so curious about these spaces that people with vision who have created for artists to do their work. And I'm interested in kind of the hard work of that. You know, the time, the labor, the money, the dedication, the resilience it takes to build something like that, which is something that all 4 of our guests and their organizations, you know, with some of them have got very long histories, even longer histories than Millett Farm. Others are newer. and how different organizations have evolved and are responding to the needs of our communities and the communities that they specifically serve. So I'm thrilled to have you all here today. We're going to go around the table, as it were, and allow our guests to introduce themselves, introduce their organizations, share a bit maybe about your mission and your history, and then who you're serving today and how, and what you see as kind of your current needs and goals for right now and the near future. So we're going to go around in kind of historical order, starting with the program that began the earliest, which is, of course, Women's Studio Workshop over in Rosendale. So I'm going to introduce Erin Zona, Artistic Director at Women's Studio Workshop. So Erin, thank you so much for joining us. And can you just tell us a bit about Women's Studio Workshop?
Yes, thank you, Anna. That was a great introduction and very inspiring. It makes me want to tell a lot of stories about Women's Studio, and I'm realizing that there's a couple of really amazing photos from our archive that I'm going to work in, even though I hadn't been planning, so it might be a little chaotic. But I'm going to share my screen for a few images. The studio, Women's Studio Workshop, was founded in 1974. And I came to the organization in 2017 during the leadership transition. I think that additionally to the work serving artists, I think Women's Studio also, from a nonprofit perspective and the way in which the organization planned ahead for the retirement of the founders and for a leadership transition, is also kind of an interesting angle to look at the longevity of an organization. I love this image. This is kind of our most iconic building, the second building, I guess, that we occupied in Rosendale, our main intaglio studio with the beautiful sunset and just across from the way. This is a nice image that happens periodically throughout the year. Just to kind of, oops, I went the wrong way. Oh gosh, I always do this when I'm presenting. I'm terrible at presenting. Someone else should be in charge. I do want to just kind of share our mission in its most, obvious state, but the mission of Women's Studio Workshop, WSW envisions a society where women's visual art is integral to the cultural mainstream and permanently recorded in history. Our mission is to operate and maintain an artist workspace that encourages the voice and vision of individual women and trans, intersex, non-binary, and gender fluid artists. We provide professional opportunities for artists at various stages of their careers and promote programs designed to stimulate public involvement, awareness, and support for the visual arts. So, that being said, I'm going to kind of focus upon two of our programs that kind of exemplify our mission. I'm going to start with an amazing photo of our founders. There are 4 women who met across at SUNY New Paltz at RIT in graduate school, and eventually decided to start this space in 1974. Anita Wetzel, Barbara Leof-Burge, Tatiana Kellner, and Ann Kalmbach. All of the founders, except for Anita Wetzel, who passed away this year, are currently engaged in some way in the studio, whether they print or publish through the studio or live across the street. We see them quite a bit. I do want to mention that our space is a printmaking focused studio space. So our facilities are based around the print processes. Intaglio, which is like an etching and relief, pretty traditional printmaking studio. We have a letterpress studio, a black and white darkroom that I'm really dedicated to keeping, even though it's used very rarely. So if you have proposals, please send them our way. We have a silk screen studio, which includes textile printing. We can do book pages, etc. Along those lines, paper making, and a bindery, which the bindery is really kind of the heart of the studio in many ways because of our artist book publishing program. We started publishing artist books in 1979, and have published 240 artist books in that time frame. So the artist book publishing program, I think, is a really good example of the way in which you can kind of look at what happens at Women's Studio and the ways that it is impactful to the artists in their technical lives as well as their economic lives as an artist. So the books are all selected. We publish about 5 books a year, and the books are selected by a selection panel. And the artists, when they come on site at the studio, they are they produce every print, they print every page, they bind every, they bind every book with the support of our studio staff, including our interns. And so, these artist books are made in editions of 50, although during COVID, we did some more commercial printing and larger editions. But one critical part of producing these books is that they are being used in society, used within the art world. And so in the past, since 1979, the past 25, 30 years that we've been publishing, 40 years, I guess, the organization has created relationships with hundreds of institutions within the United States and internationally that are collectors of artist books. And so when an artist book is published by Women's Studio Workshop, 17 copies of that book automatically are pre-sold essentially into collections across the United States. And so those institutions include, the Library of Congress, the Harvard Library, Yale Library. And so this is really critical, I think, to that mission, that part about being recorded in history, and that the visions and voices of these artists is critical to, kind of the way that we document history, create narratives, whether or not they're, fiction or nonfiction, and that those books are then utilized in public forums. And the program itself, as the artists make the books, they are provided with technical support within our studio spaces. So one thing I want to mention is that the founders and their goals was really to create a safe space for artists to create work that is not customized to the bodies and the experiences of cis men. We have some equipment, a lot of our equipment has been made on site. A lot of it has been customized to our needs, and the artists learn these technical things. I mean, one thing also to keep in mind about many technical art approaches like printmaking, papermaking, and bookbinding, these are like technologies. I mean, not in the sense that you might think of as like a science or chemistry, but like there are techniques to be learned. And within the world of the hierarchy of technique and sharing, very often there is a power dynamic. It's something that people experience a lot inside of their academic institutions, where you might be learning something from someone. They then in certain structures like possess a power that then they teach you the correct way to do that. And so our space really aims to be a very equitable and sharing space for knowledge, so that people can, so that the artists can learn in a safe environment, feel really empowered and have ownership over their craft, and then go back into, back into their world and their spaces with a better knowledge of who they are as an artist, as well as what their techniques are. And this is something that I really love, the, sort of the history of Women's Studio in that way, because one of our first studio spaces was I don't have an image of it in here, but one of the first studio spaces, we were in a domestic space, like a house in Rosendale. And, the living room was modified to be an etching studio. The papermaking studio was made in the attic, which really goes against your, sort of your instincts on paper, because there's a lot of water, which means like the whole house was probably with water sloshing around in the attic, filling up all the walls and like rotting all of the studs in the house, kind of nightmare situation. But they built the papermaking studio in the attic. And I love that history of WSW starting inside of a domestic space. Like they didn't do that with a lot of feminist intention. It was really a practical choice. We have access to this house and the landlord will let us do what we want. It wasn't as if they really, we're taking an approach as sort of boldly as, other, I think, feminist domestic spaces might have been. It was really a practical choice, but it did kind of break down, like when you think about it in retrospect, it is breaking down the expectations of like what type of work occurs inside of a home, and what work is typically done by women in these spaces. And so, I think that it's really amazing that, Women's Studio Workshop has the word work within our title, because that is what we are doing every day inside the studio. Everyone on staff, we're all at work, but then I think we also can kind of use that as ways to kind of, look at what work can mean, what the value of an artist's work in society is, and also have conversations about, economic value as well as technique. So I didn't look at my clock before I first started. But I did want to show.
You've got a couple more minutes, Erin.
Okay.
If you want.
Okay, I want to show one other quick. I'm not going to be able to make this full screen because Keynote doesn't let me do that without being fussy. But I do want to show these historical images just because in the nature of, I think, the show, these are really amazing. So these are our 4 founders in front of the house, the original house in Rosendale. Women's Studio Workshop was originally called Women's Studio Collective. I don't have a lot of details around why they ended up changing it to Women's Studio Workshop, but it did have to do with becoming a nonprofit, and the word collective didn't jive well with everyone. This is some of the really early newspaper articles about the organization. These are very clearly staged photos. We don't wear our branded t-shirts all day. But I think these are really fun. Plus that title, Women Make a Fine Art of Working Together. When they decided to purchase the building in 1979, I think 1980, just down the way in Rosendale and Binneywater Lane, it took about 3 years to prepare the studio for to prepare the building for the studio to move in. And this is our co-founder, Tanya, pouring cement or leveling the cement the day that the paper studio floor was being poured. She remembers this as a very stressful day because there were supposed to be a lot of volunteers and there weren't as many as they expected, and they had to get the cement out of the truck by a certain time. In our archive, which, another thing I should mention is that we, as we approach 2024, that's the 50th anniversary of Women's Studio Workshop. And, I feel very lucky to be artistic director at this time because I almost feel like I was this sort of, I don't know, I don't know if I believe in like psychics or things being meant to be, but, I am, putting together the 50th anniversary and like all the curators and the exhibitions that will travel hopefully to several locations across the United States, including a publication. And we will be really looking inside of the Women's Studio Archive, which we have on site. We have written a timeline for the first time of the organization's 50-year history, where we know every single artist and every exhibition that's ever occurred. And including these fun attempts in the 1980s and 90s of having earned income revenue outside of national and state grants. The studio throughout the 1990s, that top right image is a paper production. There were, quite a bit of success making handmade paper and selling them as stationery. And then that lower photo in the right is the WSW in gear clothing line that was, 1989. I think you can tell. I always threaten to bring this back. I think it's time, but we haven't quite had the capacity to start this line back up. But I do think it's a really fun, glimpse at some of what lies in the archives at Women's Studio. Okay, thank you.
Amazing, Erin, thank you. Sign me up for that clothing line. That looked incredible. Please bring it back. Okay, I'm going to hand over to our next guest, Hannah. And Hannah, let me know if I'm saying your surname wrong. Hannah Frieser, is that right? Executive Director at the Center for Photography at Woodstock. Over to you, Hannah.
Okay, thank you so much. And Erin, that was amazing. So really, really impressive and really amazing well, it's not just women, but like what some like people who see a need in the area and see a possibility what they can create from the ground up, from the cement floor up. So just really, really beautiful. Well, I'll share my screen. Hold on just a moment. PowerPoint. Let's see here and start. Okay, and so I just wanted to let you to just kind of share a little bit about our residency program, and for the time being still called Woodstock Era, as some of you might know, CPW is actually pulling up roots and is relocating to Kingston, and so we'll be hybrid for a while with the residency program still in Woodstock, but the rest of the organization taking the lead and leap to head to Kingston. So we've had our residency program since 1999, and it was created specifically for artists of color with the dialogue around race, identity, and all within the context of social justice in mind. So as part of that, we've had at this point 139 artists come through the program. We had, of course, a bit of a bump with the COVID shutdown last year. So, but we're back up and rolling, and just, you know, it's like, as some of you might know, actually, this is a nice photo to start with that. We were able to buy a artist house just a few years ago, just 4 years ago, that includes this incredible studio upstairs. It used to be the Henry Mattson house, so has a painter studio with north-facing lights and what all. And what we found at one point is that pretty much every artist who has stayed there has been drawn to doing self-portraiture also in that space. So we at one point actually did an exhibition of all the different portraits that have been taken in this studio. So, but I just wanted to kind of give you a quick tour of the program, and of course also the incredible artists that have come through the program. And so I'll just kind of guide you through this a bit. And again, so some of this was created you know, by looking at the field. CPW had at that point already invited a good number of artists just to come and, you know, do workshops or engage in what, but when they decided to formalize into a regular residency program, they decided to look at the greater need, and felt that rather than to create just a residency program for regional artists, that they would kind of split it up, and so looked at the need by specifically artists of color within the US, and then separated out support to regional artists into a grant program. So we have the Photographers Fellowship Fund for artists who are in, you know, it's like the, you know, it's like within a 40-50 mile radius of CPW. But so we've had all of these artists come from across the US to participate, and they typically come for 4 to 6 weeks each, and engage with the staff, spend time in the studio, do research, sometimes also just kind of, you know, it's like, this is such a beautiful area. So just kind of recharge their batteries, go find like nature and engage with that. And very often, if they intend to or not, art comes of that. Actually, Lola Flash is doing really well with this series that she launched here in Woodstock. So I'll just take you around again a bit more. So with each artist, we've had really close engagement between the staff and the community, also the artist community, and the artists. Again, a little bit different in the last 2 years, but if we've been really happy with the way we've been able to connect the artists and help them make something new, or have just kind of have that sounding board. Now, of course, we've gotten a lot more Zoom savvy, so which is actually going to be a positive development as the program continues, in that before that we had typically set up like special meetings for the artists with like to go to New York, or to, yes, like to meet with different people. And so what we have done now, as we've learned to use our Zoom resources better, we connect them with specialists anywhere in the country. We're also showcasing them in a symposium that we launched last year for the first time, that was specifically on social justice issues. So the last symposium was race photography and activism, with a kind of a starline speaker of Carrie Mae Weems. And we're just putting the finishing touches on the next symposium, which is going to focus on representation. So basically what happened there is that, of course, with everything that happened around race and demonstrations and counter demonstrations and Black Lives Matters, that we thought this is a really important time to give a platform for artists that have engaged in these issues through our residency program for the last 20 years. And so we invited them to take the lead in that discussion and to show their work. So just incredible. It's like, you know, one of my favorite things is to kind of look at the collection that we have and this amazing artwork that our artists have created. And it's like, you know, it's just very moving and inspiring, and a counterpoint kind of to somewhat the mainstream simplification of like, you know, it's like a lot of our artists do work around identity, but they also engage with nature, comment and do like work around pretty much any topic. But it's just really quite beautiful. This photograph by Sophie Allison, as Sophia was actually taken in our artist house. So we, again, it's like another artist who's taken the artist house as, you know, it's like as inspiration. This was pre-COVID, so no face mask, even though it's a very tiny space. But this is in our side gallery. And so in 2019, in celebration of the 20th anniversary of our residency program, we showcased artists in several exhibitions. So like we had one exhibition of all the different photographs taken in the artist house, and then Desha Devon Harris is a Saratoga Springs artist, just remarkable, just really beautiful. And so at that time we still got to cram in one spot. This would have been, of course, Zoom now. A different exhibition that we also did 2 years ago that was again, it's like pulling together these incredible works done during the residency. So just wanted to show you a couple of our workspaces or so. And just kind of, it's like the biggest part of why we have the residency program and what we always hope to provide to our artists is nurture, critical feedback, just whatever they need, but really any kind of support to help remove stumbling blocks that they might have had. I mean, this is an extremely intense time for them. They don't have to present us with a proposal that they don't have to reach very specific goals of it. We just want them to be, you know, active, and then they can take whatever direction they want to take within the residency program. And we've found that that it has always led to something quite big for them. So we have the darkroom facilities, the digital facilities, the classroom, and again, lots of time to engage with the artists directly and have them like look at their own work, you know, so get feedback if they want it, or say, it's like, you know, if they have specific goals, or so then help them meet those goals. We are packing right now, so our classroom doesn't quite look like that, but we do have a phenomenal library also with photography monographs and volumes. And then of course our artist house, and that's kind of what I wanted to show you. We've gotten the questions, so our application process will start soon. We're hoping to have that up and running next month. So let's see, where I have that here, somewhere here. So do go to our website, and we'll love to tell you more.
Thank you, Hannah. I love on your website how you describe it as the residency as a sanctuary for creativity. And I think that kind of creating a sanctuary, creating a space, and then, as you just described, not having separate preconceived notions or goals, but actually just allowing time and space for artists to be creative, or just to be, it's so valuable, it's so important. Thank you. I want to remind people to add any questions or comments in the chat, and we'll get to that after our guests have all presented, but please do, as you think of them, note your questions down. I'm going to hand over now to Rachel Carrigan, the Residency Program Manager at Denniston Hill. Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for having me. The invite came at a really, quiet time, and I was excited. I thought, oh, maybe we'll all get to go to New Paltz and meet in person, which we did not. But it's great because we can, share the time with all these lovely folks who have joined us. And I hope that maybe I can host some of our, fellow residency program folks over at Denniston Hill. I'm not usually the person who talks about anything at Denniston Hill. I'm usually the one who's quietly behind the scenes making things happen. And we have a very talented team of staff and board members and advisory board members that kind of, make all that stuff happen. And our website is a wealth of information about all the work we've done. And maybe Zachary can pull it up just so you can have a quick peek at a couple images on our About page. But, the questions I get answered the most are about the history of Denniston Hill. And we kind of, breeze over it. Yeah, I think if you go to the About page. So, where our mission and vision is constantly changing. But that kind of makes it, fun and exciting and creative and adaptable. But the original property, sort of like Kate Millett's place, started with an old farmhouse, which you can see on the left. And it had been abandoned after the Catskills Borscht Belt period in Sullivan County. So it was sort of boarded up, empty, and it's been revived by a group of artists. Since 2008, we did an official, 501c3, and we are on 200 acres that is owned by the original founder. And we now have access to about 40 more acres on the property. So it's sort of, this is our main studio space, but the land really is our biggest resource. We don't have a lot of studio facilities or outbuildings, so it's really a kind of cozy, homey environment. And we're very lucky to have a great group of artists every year who are selected by our board and advisory board. And often we get alumni recommendations for future residencies. We do occasionally do open calls for performance art workshops. And sometimes those artists come back as residents and then do future performance commissions or artist talks. So under the Swerve page, which I believe, I'm trying to think where to tell you to look for it. Yeah. So if you go to Exodus, this is sort of our current overarching theme, but you will find maybe further down, Swerve. This is our most current curatorial theme, but there you'll find a lot of videos of artist dialogues that have happened during COVID. And there's more coming, and more snippets from this year's residency season, which was about 9 or 10 folks. Usually we have 20, 25 and some workshops and retreats. And this year we sort of dialed it back with people who were working on the land, working outdoors, working with sort of whatever they could come up with, materials on hand. And, every year we're looking forward to starting new programs. This year we'll be hiring a new executive director and, hopefully getting back to doing some performance art commissions in New York City and, having another residency season upstate. But let me know in the comments if you have questions for later. And thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Denniston Hill is perhaps the program that I know the least about and that I am, super curious about. So it's really wonderful to learn a bit more about that. Just off the bat, I have a question. How many artists a season do you host at the same time?
Usually around 3. We've sometimes had 4 or 5, depending on if someone's working with a collaborator or someone's working outdoors and doesn't need a studio.
And is there a specific community that you're serving in particular? I know that the original artists who started it it was like a queer art space, right?
Yeah, mostly LGBTQ artists, but not exclusionary. It really just depends on artists who our advisory board and board come across who are in need of time and space to make work. And they're not really required to have a finished project during their residency, but we invite them back later for conversations or performance commissions so that they have that sort of downtime during the residency.
That's great, thank you. I have more questions, but I'm going to save them so that we can hear from Helen Toomer, who is the co-founder and director of Stoneleaf Retreat, which is, Helen will tell us about, but a residency program that similarly to Millett Farm and Women's Studio Workshop does focus on women artists and families as well, which I know is something Women's Studio Workshop has in their remit too. So over to you, Helen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I am the baby of the residency group because essentially the residency here at Stoneleaf is an extension of our home. We started it in 2017, myself and my husband, Eric. We live in a little house, and then there's an artist cabin that is 3 bedrooms, and we renovated the barns out there to accommodate 3.5 studios for visual artists, and we are predominantly, we are focused on supporting women artists and artists with families, and also Rebecca Reeve, who is pictured with her beautiful daughter Aggie, is actually on this call as well, so she probably didn't realize she was going to be on here. And then this is Dana Robinson, who is one of our alumni with her work at Upstate Art Weekend last year, which is another thing that we organize. So we basically started, I was working a lot in the art market and got burnt out from that aspect of it, the selling and the producing, and really wanted to get back to supporting artists because I think they're basically the ones that are going to save us. And so when we found this place up here in 2016, when I went into the barn, I knew that it had to be the residency and have space and time. So basically that's what we provide for the artists, a space and time. We have about 22 acres of land to enjoy. And so in 2017, I invited 3 artists that I knew to come up in the summer. We moved in January 2017, and by August we had the residency and a big event because I am impatient and make things up a lot. So we had 3 artists come and they stayed for 2 weeks, and I cooked for them every day, and they had access to the studios, and it was kind of like a beta program, like, how is this working? How is this feeling? What can I do? So just the same as kind of Rachel was saying, like, it evolves all the time, and we're able to do that because it's essentially just me running it. We are fiscally sponsored by NYFA. We got fiscal sponsorship at the beginning of 2020. So I was like, this is the year we're going to raise all the money. And then obviously we all know what happened. So it basically works that artists come and they spend 2 weeks here. There's normally an open call. And it's either 3 artists share the cabin, 3 women artists share the cabin. And then in 2020, we opened it up to families. Because I realized after having a small monster child in 2018 that it was incredibly difficult to function as a human and as a parent, and let alone being an artist and being able to make with a tiny thing clinging onto you for dear life. So we opened it up to families. So we've had about 24 artists, maybe more. This is an older deck, but I wanted to show you all these magnificent people that have come through the residency. Obviously, 2020 was a bit of a blip. These are our alumni. So what we did in 2020 is we didn't have a residency program. but Macon Reed, who was one of the first artists who was part of the residency, she was doing a fellowship at the Royal Academy in London. And I saw a Facebook thing that she was displaced. She had nowhere to go. So she came and stayed in the cabin for months. She's also created this magical mural on the property. And she is also actually in residence right now because she was in between studios. So she's out there making work for a museum show. So it's very kind of, we're very fluid. We see our alumni as an extension of our family, and we welcome artists to continually come back. We started an alumni program. And we also have different projects on the land. And I think Liz, oh, that's the tiny monster I mentioned, and my handsome husband. So this is Hibba Shabazz back in her residency in 2019, painting outside. I would always look outside and Hibba would just be like walking gracefully out somewhere, just painting in the woods, which is like incredible. Hibba came back this year and had a big installation in the Barn Studio during Upstate Art Weekend. So something else that we're very conscious of is connecting the communities up here with artists, with creativity, and kind of having an open space for dialogue. So we're more interested in having exhibitions and having people over. And I saw the exhibition yesterday that Anna had curated, Kate Millett, and I wasn't so aware of what she had created. And I saw that she did the Obon the festival. Is it Obon, Anna? Yeah. And we have a pond. And so basically they just set all of their intentions and dreams and things alight and swim in the pond and do things. So anyway, so stay tuned because I kind of want to do that at Stoneleaf at some point. So we're very, very conscious of bringing like artists back and continually supporting them. These are images of the little cabin that we have. It's like sweet, it's full of artwork. I actually just stayed over there for the first time this weekend with 3 girlfriends, and that was really, really nice. This is Hibba Shabazz, and a nice quote there when she was here starting her paper series, and she came back and did a huge installation. This is Keisha Scarville. She came back and did a big installation last year when we launched Upstate Art Weekend. And so it's just really great to continually be part of the artist's life and journey. And that's kind of really important for me. And as a kind of a model, like I said, we're just very nimble because it is just me. We've received some grants and some kind of generous donor funding and some crowdsourcing, but we're just basically trying to figure out how to continue to support the artists and raise more funds. We also have had some wonderful partnerships, like with the River Valley Arts Collective and also with the Baxter Street Camera Club of New York. We did an incredible family residency in which Nona Fostein was chosen, and she came up with her daughter Queen for a 2-week residency here. And so she got a great stipend and is now part of the Stoneleaf family. So I'm very interested in collaboration and cross-pollination and how we can kind of help each other to continue to help artists. This is Lasagna Cruz. She was here in 2019. She's incredible. And she also has 2 really big works on the property from her Freedom Budget series called A Freedom Budget Provides Healthcare for All, and A Freedom Budget Provides Childcare for All. And I see that every day, and I think about that every day. And we actually had one of the banners on the side of the, on a wall that faces the road. So I wanted it to be like a conversation piece for it to be public. So I'm also conscious of that there are works on the land that I want people to be able to come in and enjoy and talk about. Rebecca Reeve has a site-specific project here, and she also continues to make work on the land. And Liz Collins has done an insanely fabulous installation called Crony, which is here, which is going to continue to evolve over the years. So I hope you can all come and visit. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can find us on Instagram or email me, and I'll stop now.
Thank you, Helen. That's great. It's so interesting to hear about the 4 different organizations and the different models that you each have, different histories, different models. But the through lines are, you know, supporting artists, giving artists space and time to be creative, placing value on that. And actually all working really hard and investing a lot of time and energy and resources into giving that space and creating that space for artists, because there's this deep belief that that is valuable, right? And that that is meaningful and it matters, and we need to, as a society, as a group, invest in that and work with artists and for artists. So let's open it up to the group. So if people want to place their questions in the chat or raise their hand, or Zach, as the moderator, I don't know how you feel about people just unmuting themselves and saying hi. I welcome that.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Or if any of the organizations have questions for each other. I suspect you're curious about different aspects of each other's work as well. So. Or Zach, I know you've probably got a question.
I was gonna say, we can all sit in silence and stare at each other. Really, most of my questions were answered. I think maybe the thing I'm curious about from the perspective of, you know, being an employee at one of these organizations, I mean, for Helen, it must be quite different since it's your house. But, you know, what drew you to the organization, and was it in part the support that you're providing to artists? I mean, I know that in a lot of these organizations, it's not just that's a piece of the work. Is that a question? I'm not sure I actually asked the question. Yeah, but what drew you personally? You know, what was like your personal, yeah.
I can take that one on.
Okay.
You know, I was a working, I mean, I'm a working artist. I still, you know, the way that I've found that I can be the director of a nonprofit and make my own work is that I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I spend 2 hours in my studio. That's about the only way I can make it work. But I often get asked, especially from people who knew me before I was at Women's Studio, like, what do you do? How is your work? As if my work at Women's Studio is sort of taking away my creativity, taking away from this other part of my life. And I think that that's something that everyone who is an artist or working within the arts sector kind of has to negotiate their role and like what they want to actually be doing. And for me, I think that at least for this time period, you know, I turned 41 recently. So I'm dedicating, you know, another 5 years to kind of being the artistic, you know, person, like the visionary for Women's Studio artistically, as well as like an ally to all of our artists. And I accidentally kind of stumbled upon something that I like even more than working in my studio, which is like meeting with artists about their work and helping them grow their work and their creative lives and their economic viability, and negotiating how their work exists in the world. And so for me, I kind of had to change my definition of success a little bit and kind of just like lean into whatever I'm doing at Women's Studio and sort of just say that's what I do. And I do think that arts admin people are oftentimes really like the work that they do and the creative work that it requires in supporting artists. It's really like a very creative and exhausting kind of way to use your brain. And wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderfully creative way to use your brain that it is oftentimes kind of I feel like they should give an award every year that's like, I don't know, 25 awards to arts administrative. I mean, I know that some places are doing that, but, you know, so it is, the way it worked for me is I had to change my definition of success and kind of just, you know, kind of give myself up to it. But I definitely know that I'm in the right line of work for now.
Thank you, Erin. I see Fahim has his hand raised. Fahim is the new director over at Unison Arts. Hi.
Hello, Zach. Hello, everyone. Hi, folks. I'm Fahim, as Zach introduced me. I'm the new vision guy, ED, and curator, and resident sort of like diversity hire. I had just one question. I just started a new residency at Unison. We have 2 spaces. We have one new space and the historic space that we've had. The new space is actually dates back from 1776, from the original Huguenot sort of migration, intervention, however you want to call it. The residencies I have, or the residents I have, are probably well known to folks here, Michael Asbill and Vernon Byron. And I have a certain time frame for them. I'm just curious as to what determined for y'all how long your residencies would be. Were the reasons somewhat sort of financially governed? Were they availability, seasonal? What was it? I have, if anything, I have so much space, I don't know what to do with it in my 2 different spaces. But one of the concerns I have is the activation of a residency, giving enough time, but not so little time that the work kind of comes out stillborn, right? How to activate sort of your own spaces, how to activate an artist practice. As an artist myself, how the change in scenery, change in location, change in different coalitions of art workers, how that changes a practice. What has been your response?
I'll take that one quick. So we do 2-week residencies. And I remember talking to somebody, a gallerist, who scoffed at me. They were like, you couldn't possibly do a 2-week residency. That's not a residency. That's not enough time. And the reason that started is most of the emerging artists who wanted to do residencies were working. And as we know, in this glorious country that we're in, you get 10 days vacation. So I was like, 1 week wasn't enough. So it was 2 weeks. And every time we've asked the artists, is this enough time? Like I said, a lot of the alumni come back, which is helpful because they get to know the space and they want to come back and do something. They understand it a little bit more. But that's been a really good entry point for us to be able to have more artists. And it might change in the future. So that's our answer.
Anyone else?
I can chime in. I think our ideal was always to have month-long residencies, and our board really wanted some 3-month-long residencies, but unless we caught someone sort of between grad school, PhD, or some wonderful part in their life where they had 3 months to spend on a residency. Even now, it seems, just from me being there 7-8 years, that it's getting a lot harder to have people for a month, and not everyone can take that much time off. I think that 2 weeks is great. I mean, we've had some week-long residencies, and it really does take people a few days to kind of orient. But we did have an artist come and make beer for a week, and then he came back a few weeks later and bottled beer, and then came back a month later and served beer and had labels and talked about all the different things he put into his beer, and so it was also nice to have that continuity. And I think we'd like to do more of that, of have someone come up maybe a few times over a season, especially since we're more land-based. So come in the spring, come in the fall, come in the middle of winter.
Our residencies are 4 to 6 weeks in length. And that's also kind of worked out best for the artists. We always have a crunch time a bit in the summer, since so many of the artists are also teaching, and that's their best availability. But we make it work. So we've occasionally offered shorter residencies or so, but we find that because we spend a lot of time talking to them and also bringing in technical staff to help them with digital and what all, that if they typically it's like they need that at least that full month. So we decided during the shutdown, it's like not to do remote residencies. There was another decision because we figured that personal engagement is so important. And but we did toy with the idea, should we work remotely and make it then longer, or it's like change it in format. But in the end, we decided that it was more important for us to have them here with us.
Yeah, at WSW, our residencies are between 4 and 10 weeks, depending on the residency that the person has been awarded. Our artist book residency is the one that is the longest because we produce those books on site, and some of them require a 10-week production schedule, in which we wish we had 12 or 16 weeks usually. But we are looking, I don't know really where they landed on that number or historically. It's something I'm going to look into actually in our archive to see kind of where those numbers came from. But that's where we are right now.
Thanks. Emily has a wonderful, oh, Theme, did you have?
Well, I just wanted to commend everyone on their work. I've spent so much time at Women's Studio Workshop. I used to teach at SUNY New Paltz, so I used to bring my students over. Ariel Schonberg is a friend, and Ariel did amazing work. And thank you so much, Hannah, for taking CPW to the space it's in. So I've just always loved that space. So thumbs up to y'all and your work.
Thank you. Emily, do you want to ask your question? Do you want me to ask it for you?
I can ask it. I just wasn't sure I'd remember it, so I figured I'd throw it in. Yeah, I have a question. It's quite a general question about how the residency actually functions in action. Whether, for example, it's useful to have some kind of requirement, like I know for the Women's Studio Workshop one, there are some requirements about, or at least some expectation of that, like there'll be a book produced at the end, or applying with a specific project, or having wide open residencies, and how those might work, how much you find it's helpful to kind of intervene and connect people, or be around for the artists, or how much you just allow people to just be there and make whatever they make, or if there's a decompression time. Really open question.
Okay, I'll go first then. So because it's an extension of our home, I'm just like, I want to hang out with you all the time, but I need to understand what your boundaries are. So, I'm like, hi, I want to cook you dinner. I want to hang out. I want to know everything. And I like that kind of, that very obviously, you probably tell, very informal, and it's part of our home. So we're going to be around, but also we have an orientation. So whether it's the artists with their families, when they meet, they settle in, we have an orientation, and we go all around the land. We go to the studios, like, this is this is our house, like, this is all of this is yours. And there's no expectations, even if they don't ever want to go into the studio and they just want to walk around and look at the trees and think, it's like, they don't have to produce anything. And then normally what we'd say is like, we would love to connect you with some people to do studio visits with, and I do a studio visit in the beginning and at the end. And then sometimes we'll text each other and be like, hey, it's 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. Do you want an Aperol Spritz by the fire? So yeah, so that's our very informal answer.
That's amazing. That's great support right there.
At WSW, we, as you mentioned, we have pretty strict production calendars for the artist books, and that can get pretty intense. It's a kind of intense relationship that I have with the artist usually, trying to keep them on schedule and also, have it be, good work for them to be doing and fun. But in other residencies, we provide various levels of support, and we have entrance interviews with artists before they arrive to kind of get an idea of their goals. But really the artist book residency is the only one that is really very, the pace is really very specific. But it is, there are responsibilities, but I think also ties back to what I was saying about Women's Studio starting off in a house, like we really are kind of caregivers to the artists. If it's something like they need help learning a new technique or their toilet's not working, it's like we're there to kind of make sure that they're having the best experience and facilitating that for them and whatever is required for them.
One thing also with our residents is that very often it's the first residency they've ever participated in. So and many go on to other residencies. So we just kind of take extra care. And I think what Aaron just mentioned, it's like we have numerous conversations with the artists ahead of time to kind of see where they're at, and also to kind of see what resources they might benefit from. and then and just kind of let that set the pace. So I mean, we can be as ready to go as they wish, or if they want to just kind of just kind of have some time to themselves, or go hiking for a while. I mean, especially if for artists, we have 2 artists coming next in a bit of more than a month or so. I mean, this is the time to be out there and kind of recharge batteries, and then go into the studio and again, it's like we've had no artist ever that has blown off their time here, so they've all gotten amazing things done. It's like, it's just the opposite. It's like, shouldn't you take a break? Let us feed you, so you make sure that you're okay.
That's great. Thank you.
So Carla, I see your hand raised. Would you like to unmute, or do you want me to read? I'll read. Okay. Yeah, do you have connections? Do any of you have connections or collaborations with international residency organizations? Is the question Carla's curious about, and especially now with the everything being virtual.
Yeah, at Women's Studio, we have 2 international residencies. One is in Malmo, Sweden, with a studio called KKV. We do an exchange program, and then we had before COVID a new program starting with the Book Art Museum in Poland, which is this amazing museum that inside this mansion that we've had to pause because of COVID, but we will, fingers crossed, in the next year be posting about a new international partnership there.
Awesome. Morgan, I want to hear your voice, Morgan.
Okay, then I will unmute. My question is that since we know what a rich area this is for artists historically over time and all different kinds of efforts, including what you all are representing here, does anyone know of a place that's actually archiving this information, keeping track of this rich history?
I don't know of anywhere that is, kind of collecting information from different institutions. I know that different institutions probably have their own great archives. I know Women's Studio Workshop does. I'm sure that WAM in Woodstock does. But I don't know of who is actually collating them. Maybe the Sojourner Truth Library at City New Paltz needs to be doing that work.
I think so.
I think so too.
Especially the efforts of smaller, independent, freestanding groups that come and go, but they have an impact over time. Working with the Lesbian History Archives, I know how important those little stories are of smaller groups and efforts that people make.
And I'll say that at the Dorsey Museum in our permanent collection, we certainly strive to collect representative artworks that then open up these stories and that are part of these histories, right? But then it takes curatorial or student or academic contextualization to draw out the stories around those artworks themselves. But in terms of archives, collecting the paraphernalia, stewarding that history, I'm not sure of a centralized place that's doing it.
So Dawn is curious if any of the presenters are SUNY New Paltz alumna. No? We have a lot of SUNY New Paltz adjacent people.
My wife is, but not me.
2 of WSW's co-founders are.
We have staff members. We've had and a ton of fantastic interns also, many of whom have then later become staff members.
If I put my email, I'm done. If I put my email in the chat, if anyone has an alum at their, an alumna or alum at their organization, would you be able to connect me or give me their name and I'll professionally stalk them? Because on LinkedIn or just Google, as the FMPA liaison in the Career Center at SUNY New Paltz, I do a bi-weekly arts chat IG Live for students to hear what our alumni are doing in creative careers. And yeah, so I'm just always trying to line up. I know Fahim Hader, you're on here and I wasn't aware that you're at Unison, so we can expect an email. But yeah, I'd be excited if anyone would be able to connect me. I'll do, if you give me the names and I'll do the stuff. Thank you.
I see that Corinne mentioned that River Valley Arts Collective might be compiling resources. Is that, I think Allison Baker was here. Is Allison still here? She would be, she would definitely know.
If Alison's not here, from what I know of that project, it was more about contemporary artists in the area right now.
Yeah. So Stephanie asks, what percentage of artists accepted into your residencies have MFAs? That's a really interesting question. Anybody want to take it?
Well, I can jump in. I would say about at least 2/3 or 3/4 of our artists in residence have MFAs. It's like it does sometimes show in the work or so. We also have some guidelines that we don't accept artists while they are in the MFA program, with some exceptions or so, but just we really value them having their independent voice, and that's sometimes difficult to distinguish if they're still in a MFA program. But having said that, I mean, it's like I know some incredible artists that don't have their MFA and that have just been so engaged in the arts that I hate to say that they might not ever go back and get their MFA, and they might just be fine with it. But overall, it's like I would say the majority of the artists that make it into our residency program tend to have master's degrees.
It's something, you know, I didn't even think to mention is that Anna had the wonderful idea of starting our artist in residence program, which is an MFA student. Emily Hussart, who spoke earlier, was our second. And the thing, I think the reason I wanted to say that is because what we're hearing about from a lot of the panelists is about how they're supporting artists. But the thing that I realized was that how much it gave us, how much having Emily like look at our collection and, you know, bring her creativity and her energy, like it really like made us so much better. And you know, that I think, yeah, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think that's another kind of model of an artist in residency, right? It's attached to an institution, you know, like us, and our specific goal with that was to have artists who are on campus doing their MFA here, engaging with our collection and engaging with our audiences. So they don't get to live in a lovely barn in a beautiful space, unfortunately, but they do get a little extra time in their semester to work with our collection and our audiences. And Emily, who was our artist in residence last year, did an incredible job and just ran with it. Yeah, but that's still in our infancy, that program here. So that's all flexible as well. Yeah. There's a question in the chat. Do any of your organizing organizations collaborate with one another, for example, sharing resources or offering studio visits to the residencies of other organizations? How much contact do you each have with other groups and other residency programs in the area? Maybe not a lot, or maybe a lot.
So I may be able to help answer that question, at least one facet of it. So there's this new group called Ulster ACE. That's sort of a makeshift umbrella organization for art centers in Ulster County. That includes actually Women's Studio Workshop, Opus 40, Woodstock Art School, and Ask at this moment, and includes Unison. And we get together and we try to organize we are trying going forward to push what art organizations can do. And that came out of an informal breakfast that my predecessor, Alex Baer, started with some folks in Woodstock. So it's this kind of unofficial executive directors breakfast that we all do in each other's spaces. So as that becomes a bigger thing, would love to invite DDs in this Zoom call to join, because we do collaborate on effectively how to leverage, how to get stronger and better in the communal spaces that we do have. So instead of trying to be non-cooperative, trying to go for the grant dollars that we all have to, in fact, compete for, how can we use our strength, collective strength, to get more political power? Essentially, it's a collectivization, unionization argument that we try to build on. And we're actually working on that. We had a meeting like that last Thursday at Unison. So that part of the conversation is also connected to the questions about residencies, building studio spaces, building social spaces in which we can work together. So that is one way that I know of, that I'm part of, but I can't speak to the other ways.
I think another thing I would say is we are part of, the Dorsky is part of the Hudson Valley Visual Arts Collection Consortium, hvvacc.org, which is an online database of some of the collections from the Dorsky, Women's Studio Workshop, right? Yeah, Center for Photography Woodstock, and Woodstock Artists Association Museum. And I think Birdcliff is also part of that group. So I that's, in some ways, it started at least very collaboratively. I was in like one of the last meetings. Any other thoughts on collaboration with each other? Well, we should. I'm down. Great. So I'm gonna ask Stephanie's question, and I think we should start wrapping up. Stephanie has another concrete question. I love concrete questions. What is the average age of artists in your residencies?
You know, I don't have that data right off the top of my head, actually, but I know that it's very, and the same thing with the MFAs. We just recently started collecting data about MFAs. I would say it's probably half, at least half, probably. But you know, we have lots of, and within our residency pool, the audience, I guess, or the applicants for each one, we try to make sure there's a variance of opportunities, individuals who are parents, individuals of a certain age, et cetera. And so I think it's important to be looking at that data for sure.
Ours range from late 20s to early 50s. So it's a mix.
We've been really lucky.
I'm not quite sure about us. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, I don't have hard data in front of me. I mean, we do often have a lot of younger emerging artists, but we've been really lucky each year that we just happen to invite someone who's in the sort of 70 plus range. And, you know, it's a great experience for younger artists and for us as an institution sort of addressing, you know, aging artists.
Yeah, here at with the CPW program, my guess is that it's a little bit on the younger scale. but it's like other residency programs. When I was running the program in Syracuse, we've had it's like people in 70s even. So, and I agree, it does make for a richer experience for all the artists, and takes like it puts a different perspective on the drama that a younger artist might feel. So yeah, so it's open. We don't have a restriction of any kind.
Nice. Great. Well, I want to just thank all of you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing about your organizations. And it's a real inspiration to me. I think I agree with Helen that artists will, if anybody, will be the ones that save the world. And that providing support and space and time, I mean, is just so valuable. So thank you, all of you. And Anna, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just to thank everyone who came today. I hope this is the beginning of more conversations that we can have together. You're always all very welcome at the Dorsky, as are all your folks that have residencies with you. Like, please, like, let's stay in contact and figure out how else we can support each other and partner and connect. Same to you, Fahim. So yeah, thanks so much. This has been really great, and I've learned loads, and it's been really fun to connect with you all. Thank you. And just a quick pitch. On November 7th, there will be another Zoom program in relation to Anna's exhibition, Life After the Revolution, with former colony residents, people who lived at the colony in Poughkeepsie. And it's going to be like a casual conversation. Think of like a, brunch with the ladies. So that's Sunday, the 7th of November at 11. Bring a mimosa and some questions. It'll be a really sort of informal chat. I'm hoping that we'll get lots of like good anecdotes about life on the farm. Yeah, yeah, on Zoom, Emily, on Zoom. Yeah. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Hannah and Rachel and Aaron and Helen and Anna and all of our attendees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.